Some people described it as, oh, you'll feel a tingling. And I was like, tingling? It feels like burning or stinging. The first 3 months of my baby's life, every time I heard her or saw her, my nipples would just sting. And that feeling's down now, at least not so bad. But yeah, when I had the cupcakes, it wasn't just the pain through the nipple when she fed, it was like through the whole breast tissue. It felt like not just the stabbing, but like razor blades or thumbtacks were being sucked through my entire breast tissue every time she fed.
Before we begin, I want to share something special with all of you expecting parents out there. As an internationally board-certified lactation consultant, I've seen firsthand how a little planning can go a long way to helping you achieve your baby feeding goals. That's why I'm offering you my free ebook. It's called Birth Practices to Support Breastfeeding, and it's a workbook. So check out the link in the description below. Hi, Sharon. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. So why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself and your family?
My name is Sharon. I am a first-time mom on the older side, and I have a 17-month-old little girl.
Awesome. And I know you both because you come to a social gathering I host monthly. And I met you there, and you were telling me a little bit about all the things that you've experienced while feeding your little one. And I thought it would be great to get to share those on the podcast. So I'm really excited to hear your whole story. I've heard bits and pieces, but definitely not the whole thing.
Yeah, I'd love to share my story because I will definitely say the hardest part of parenting for me has been breastfeeding. It was a really steep learning curve. I had no idea what to expect. We took all the parenting classes. We were like, it's going to be, the baby is going to latch in that first golden hour as long as you do skin to skin. It's innate, it's natural. They'll just crawl right up. They'll find the breast, it's going to be easy. So I was like, okay, great. I plan to breastfeed because why not? Formula's expensive. I'm made to do this. So that was the goal. And I mean, now we're at the goal. It's great. I'm exclusive breastfeeding. It's awesome. I pump once a week when I go to work, and but back getting started. Oh my gosh, I'll start from the beginning, I guess.
Yeah. Well, before you start with your actual story, I love to take people way back into their childhood. And I'd like to ask about what exposure you had to baby feeding throughout your childhood and teenage years.
I guess none. I don't know. My brother was born when I was like 4, but I don't remember anything. I think my mom did breastfeed, but I don't think I ever saw it. And then growing up as a kid, I never saw it. I've never was taught anything about it, like in school. And I wasn't around people who had babies. I never saw it. And actually, like, the only breastfeeding I ever saw was actually at my baby shower. I had a friend who had
Oh,
a
wow.
baby. She had like a 3-month-old, and she came to my baby shower, and she was breastfeeding her baby. And that is literally the only time I've ever seen someone breastfeed before I then gave birth, and was like, good luck.
Isn't that wild that that's most of our experiences? We're lucky if we have a close friend or family member who felt comfortable enough to breastfeed openly in front of
Yeah.
us. And when you saw that friend breastfeeding at your baby shower, did you have any feelings of like, wow, I'm going to be doing that soon? Or I wonder what that's like? Did you take a minute to stop and think about her experience? Or was it just something you
I
didn't
didn't
really
think
think
about it
about
all.
until
I
later?
just thought like, cool, she's here and she's feeding her baby. That's what you do when you're a parent. And I don't know, I just was like, I was just also glad that everybody at my baby shower was super just okay with her just feeding her baby there because, you know, some people aren't, but I was really glad that everyone who was there was just, like I would hope that everyone would be, but you never know with some of the older people like grandma's age.
Yeah. And then Did you take any classes or anything or read any books to try to help
Yeah,
prepare
my husband
for
and I both
breastfeeding?
took the classes, the baby prep class, the breastfeeding class, the infant care class, the infant CPR and safety class. We took them
Okay.
all. We were like nonstop taking classes since our like, week 14 of pregnancy.
Yeah. And did you find the breastfeeding classes specifically to be helpful?
Not really. I didn't learn enough. I mean, all the things I didn't learn enough.
Yeah. And did you think at the time that it was helpful or only in looking back where did you think, wow, there wasn't enough there?
At the time, I think I just thought, okay, this is what we're gonna do. I took notes. I was like, okay, this is how it works. Okay, got it. Okay, great. Okay, so that's what's gonna happen. Okay.
Right. Right. A textbook experience you'll have.
Yeah, and the actual experience is like, whoa, no one can prepare you for this. You can take every class on the planet, and you're just like,
All right.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So let's
You
get
are,
into it now.
yeah. So, at the hospital after I delivered, I thought that the baby would latch right if they did the skin to skin. She didn't right away. It took a really long time. I don't think she latched at all for the first 24 hours. I was worried. It was tough because in all the classes, they tell you to watch for those early feeding cues, like when they're rooting, turning their head, before they start to get to the second level cue with the fussing and crying or starting to suck on their hand or and certainly catching before the third level where they're just really crying and screaming, and then it's gonna be harder to get them onto the breast because they need to be calmed down before they can even latch. And because I had gestational diabetes, again, they didn't tell me anything about this. They just said, "Once the baby comes out, you won't have gestational diabetes anymore." And they didn't tell me anything about what would happen to the baby. And they just said, "Oh, yeah, you can stop pricking your finger to take your blood readings once the baby comes out. That's when this ends for you." What they didn't tell me is, because I had gestational diabetes, in order, for them to check my baby, they would have to prick her heel and get a blood reading of her before and after every feed attempt. And so that meant every time that we saw a feeding cue, we had to press the button to call for the nurse and wait for the nurse to come in and prick. So first few times, like, of course, you're getting pricked and that's not comfortable. It probably hurts. I don't know if the babies have nerves or if they're understanding those sensations yet when they're brand new in the world, but they were very comfy in the womb and nothing was jabbing them. And then they get jabbed before they can eat. Of course, she's coming to the breast screaming and crying. And then sometimes I would call the nurse and no one would come right away. And we were waiting and waiting like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I'd call again. They said, "Yeah, we'll get to you when we get to you." And I'm just like, I need to feed my baby. I'm just gonna try. And, they'd come an hour later and be like, "What do you mean you fed her without us taking the blood reading?" And I was like, "Well, sorry, my baby wanted food. I was gonna try still." And, all these people, the shifts kept changing. Different people would give me different advice, like, hold it this way, sandwich it this way, do this. And they weren't clear about, like, they were saying sandwich it this way, like a sandwich, actually horizontal, when you're holding the baby horizontal. And then I'm imagining, how does that work? Because the breast is now like long ways going into their tiny mouth. And then eventually I learned that you want a sandwich is the way that makes it flat going into their tiny mouth the flat way. And they weren't clear. They didn't show me correctly too. They were trying to help me. Eventually by the second day they gave me a nipple shield and they were telling me to express a little into the nipple shield to get it going. I could not figure out hand expressing, which actually even now, like some of my friends have said, "Oh yeah, hand expressing is the only way I can get milk out. The pump doesn't do anything for me." And I can't hand express at all, but the pump does work wonders for me. Like, so, and at the hospital, I asked, there was nothing coming out. I asked if I could pump, and they said, "No, you just have to try harder." So they wouldn't let me have a pump until the third day, about an hour before we checked out. They at least taught me how to use a pump before I left. And that's, I guess, something that I wish I did learn a little bit more about. None of the classes taught you how to use a pump. It was just, this is how you get a pump from insurance. And then you just have to figure out how it works. So luckily, my husband read the instructions and set it up for me, sterilized all the parts, and he showed me, and he watched the video on the website of the pump, and he's like, okay, this is how it works. Because your brain afterwards, you're just like, you can't anything.
Right, it's so hard to you're in such a haze. Yeah, it is great that you had a partner who was willing to put so much time and energy to that one part that he could do. I know often partners feel a little bit helpless. They want to be involved. They want to help with baby feeding, and sometimes they don't know what to do, and because you're in that time of feeling so kind of brain foggy, it's hard to assign people things to do. So when a partner is able to take initiative and say, I will take over this, I will learn this and help you do it, that does take a lot of mental load off the feeding parent.
Yeah, it was great. Like in the beginning with pumping that first week, he was washing pump parts round the clock, and we were running them through the sterilizer after every wash because, we
Mm.
didn't know. Eventually, an
Mhm.
IBCLC told me, you don't have to sterilize it every time. You can wash
Mm.
it and sterilize it once a day and then eventually once a week. And I was like, oh, well, we were just pumping and washing round the clock.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, at the hospital too, like when I finally did get her on, like I was thinking in my head that one of my friends was warning me about breastfeeding. They're like, it is physically painful, but emotionally rewarding. And when she finally like was on, I didn't realize that she was just kind of chomping down with her little gums, and it was very painful, but I was just so grateful that she actually was on. And I didn't realize that she had basically flattened my nipple to this very thin flat pink, like it was rough. And I asked the nurses about a tongue tie because my husband has a tongue tie, and it's a dominant gene. And so, of course, we expected her to have a tongue tie, but they're all like, nope, no tongue tie. You just have to try harder. And then on her very first pediatrician appointment, the day after we got home and we brought her back in to see the pediatrician, she was asking how things are going. I explained that breastfeeding was still hard, but we were pumping. We were doing where we pumped and then syringed up the little bit of colostrum that came out and did the syringe. And they had taught us at the hospital about the little trick where you stick your pinky in and you at the roof of their mouth. And if you feel them lick on the back of your finger, you can release a little from the syringe, which is essentially training them to get the milk. And if they're not licking, if they're just biting down, then don't squeeze the syringe to let any milk out. So we were doing a lot of training a good latch. We were doing um, with the bottle. My husband was doing like when her motherhood, like lips over her teeth like this, he was slowly pulling the bottle out a little bit to get her lips just very little. Like if you pulled too hard or too fast, it would pop right out. But he was just very little bit until it pulled out her lips essentially a little bit. Because we tried to grab her lip and lift it up and grab the bottom one and flip it down, but she was just so limey and slippery between drool and just milk drooling everywhere. And of course, bottles, right? We didn't know. Like the Lancino bottle looks like a good nipple shape, but there is no low flow. Their lowest flow is like equivalent to a 3 on other bottle nipples. And so we didn't know that one was just pouring milk out everywhere. And took us a while trying to figure out the best bottle nipples. And anyway, the pediatrician was like, oh, let me see what's so difficult about it for you. And she was like, well, you're doing everything right. Let's take a look in her mouth. And she said, oh, she has a tongue tie. And we're like, we thought so. And so the pediatrician was like, I'm going to get you into Mass ENT this afternoon. I'm going to call a colleague over there and have them free up a spot for you to go right now. And so we just sat in the pediatrician's office while they called and found a spot for us. And of course, I didn't expect 2 doctor's appointments in one day, and we had to go straight there. There was no time to go home first. So I didn't bring a pump with me. I didn't bring a hand pump with me. Um, I was like, oh boy, I cannot feed my child directly. I'm going to need to pump. At this time, I think I needed to pump at least every 3 hours. And, to the pediatrician's office, an hour appointment. Then I was like, oh boy, this is yikes. What do I do? I happen to have the Haka milk collector in my diaper bag. And I was like, I'm going to try to use this as a hand pump. Squeezed out a little bit and used the syringe and gave her some of that because right after they did the snip, they said, well, right after we snip, feed her. And I'm like, I have not been able to directly feed her. She cannot latch. I don't know what to do. So right afterwards, she was crying. We took that syringe. We had like 1 milliliter and we gave it to her. The pediatrician did tell us, she's like, your milk hasn't come in yet. It's day 5. I want you to pump every hour and a half. And at this time, I was only pumping one side at a time. I had tried pumping 2 sides at a time, but then you're washing double parts and double bottles. And I'm like, let's just do one at a time and collect with the Hako on the other side. And so it took me longer to pump, but it was less washing parts. So the
You were
pediatrician had
telling
me
me what the
pump
pediatrician
every
said
hour and a
said.
half, which was exhausting, especially at night. I definitely did not wake up every hour and a half and pump. I think I probably did the every 3 overnight back to what I was doing during the day. And I don't think I ever hit the goal really to hit every hour and a half because it took me like an hour to pump because I was doing almost half an hour each side, but between getting your pump parts, connecting them all, getting seated at your pump station, and then, my husband would then take the parts and wash and do the rest, but still it took me like an hour to pump. So to be pumping every hour and a half, you have half an hour in between every like to eat, go to the bathroom. It was nutso in the beginning.
Yeah, and explain why you were single pumping again.
I just didn't want to have more parts to wash because that took time too. And it was also hard for me to hold the 2 because then I couldn't do anything else with the free hand. And the nursing bras that have the pump holder, they just didn't hold it onto you strong enough because once it just starts flopping, then you're just leaking all over the place. So like I still needed my arms to kind of support it, holding it against me. So I was just like, with one, I can hold it and with I can use my other hand to scroll my phone or keep reading more about breastfeeding, which I was essentially doing the whole time every time I was pumping is reading more about breastfeeding. So I was really determined and watching more videos and yeah, but what I didn't know is that excess pumping would send me into oversupply. And that was I mean, it worked out because eventually when I did not have enough milk, especially when my period did eventually come back, we really hit the freezer bags hard. And it was good that we had them. In the beginning, I was just collecting a freezer full of milk and I was like, what do I do? I ended up giving some away and just to make room in the freezer.
Yeah, and when you went to the pediatrician and discovered the tongue tie, did she ever refer you to an IBCLC or to do any body work or anything, or it was just the advice that she was giving you?
Just went to she just had us go to Mass ENT to get the tie snipped. And then eventually, I ended up finding an IBCLC because the lactation consultant through the hospital, like, I think she's just a lactation consultant, and she every time we called with some difficulties, she didn't get back to us right away, and sometimes in her messages, it was, "Well, there's another baby who is failure to thrive, they're not gaining weight at all, and yours is, so, I gotta take care of this other family." And she was like, "You're fine." And I was like, "Whatever, we're pumping and we're getting the milk into her." So, and I just had this goal of, I I don't wanna wash pump parts all my entire life. So I was like, every day in that first week, I was trying to get her to latch at least once a day. That was the goal. And of course, it didn't work, but we had bottles. So I was like, "It's okay, we tried, give her the bottle. Okay, we tried, give her the bottle." Eventually, I got the 1, and I was like, "Hey, I'm doing 1 a day pretty consistently. Let me go up to let's try 3." And then 3 quickly pretty easily turned to 5 times a day, but I was still pumping because it was still a challenge to get her on and to keep her on, and everything was slippery, and it's really hard because in the beginning, I feel like to breastfeed, you need to be an octopus with at least 8 arms or at least
Mm,
6 hands, right?
yeah.
Like, at the hospital, it was like my 2 hands, my husband's 2 hands, and the nurse's 2 hands. That's kinda how we, could even attempt at the hospital, and then at home, it's just my husband and I. hands and we're just like, well, someone's hand has to sandwich the breast. Someone's hand has to hold the baby's body. Someone's hand has to hold the baby's head. Someone's hand has to um, keep the shirt from falling in her face. And, like nursing shirts, there are a lot of the open, up and down. I now have switched to things that only open just down. So you don't have the extra layer that's trying to come in, like, uh,
Right. Yeah.
pop the baby off. But
Yeah, and how many weeks of age were you finally at those 3 to 5 body feeding sessions a day? How long did it take to get there?
oh, probably by the end of that week and a half, maybe, like, that first week, I tried
Okay.
I mean, like, day 5 of life range, she came
Okay.
home, that first week home because she was already 5 days old, when,
Okay.
we were like, "We're gonna hit this hard," and trying to get the milk to come in because it was still just syringing little bits of colostrum, like 1 milliliter, then 5 milliliter, then once we went into the 20 milliliter syringes, we're like, "Hey, we have enough to fill a bottle," and then I was just really determined, and I think by the end of the second week, I probably was, like, feeding her 7 times a day and, like, pumping every other or, bottle every other, which was a nice break because my husband could do every other feed, and at night, it was really nice because we could take the shifts, like, I would have a 4-hour stretch of sleep, and then by then, I probably was pumping in the nighttime every 4 hours instead of 3, so I was doing 3 hours during the day, 4 at night.
So you were pumping for every feeding, even the feedings that she was feeding at the body with?
I just pumped out what was because it was still so engorged and she wasn't finishing. And so I just pumped to I mean, in the beginning, I don't know if everyone has this experience, but I would toggle from, like, gigantic double Ds, and I'm naturally, like, a flat or basically double As, like, smaller than an A, and I would toggle between gigantic double Ds only down to, like, a B or so, and nowadays, it's just toggles from, I don't know, an A down to a double A. Like, it doesn't have that huge fluctuation. If it's really a long time, like 6 or 7 hours, maybe it's up to, like, a B or a double B, but this was, like, it was almost the size of my head. Like,
Yeah, you got a lot of milk.
yes, and I learned so much. I learned, like, there was one time I fell asleep and I didn't pump or, like, because between pumping and giving the bottle, because my husband gave her the bottle in the middle one, I think it was 10 hours between, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh," and of course, then I pumped out, like, I filled, like, 3 bottles worth, and I learned about, different people have different milk storage capacity, and, like, some people who have a small milk storage capacity, they have to empty more often. Some who have a larger milk storage capacity, you don't have to empty as often, and you could pump more just less frequently, and I was like, "Oh, I lucked out, I have a high milk storage capacity. That's, lucky." It was interesting to
Yeah, so you were able to was she when you eventually contacted an IBCLC, did you ever do any weighted feeds to see what she was taking in a sitting?
Yes, we did,
Okay.
and, of course, my baby performs well uh, under watch. But at home, you're like, "Oh, we have showing none of these, problems here in front of the person who's watching to help us with these problems," right? So, it was funny. And
Like taking your car to the mechanic.
yeah, and, the lactation consultant at the hospital, we did come in for an appointment, and, she would say, "If she doesn't get a good latch, then just unlatch her and try again." But anytime we would unlatch her, it would be all over. There was no getting her back on. She was screaming and crying. And so I just developed this own little thing for myself that when she's on with a very tight, bitey chomping latch, I would just start singing to her until she relaxed a little bit. And we never could flip up her lips. So what I started doing was taking my breast tissue and kind of shoving it into her mouth. And then as the suction, and then I'd let go, and then the breast tissue would kind of flop back out, and that would kind of bring her lips out, sort of like what my husband was doing with the bottle to try to get her lips to fly out. So I sort of like figured out my own little ways to achieve the same thing. And I was in there at the appointment singing to her, and she's like, I would never normally recommend if they come on with a bad latch that you don't unlatch them, but what you're doing seems to work for you." And I was like, "Okay."
Yeah, were you in pain while she was breastfeeding
Yeah, and they
still?
taught me how to look for if she was biting versus sucking, mainly the flattened nipples. And she did quite a bit of damage to that one at the hospital when we were still in the hospital there. That took a long time to heal. Pumping helped. And then I notice now, like with teething, whenever she's super teethy and just chewing, I take a break from feeding for like a day up to 3 days and just pumping. Of course, now she's older. She knows when she wants mama and when she'll accept a bottle. She'll only accept a bottle to go down at night because my husband does the bedtime routine. So otherwise, if she's awake enough and fully realizing what's going on, she will take that bottle and, like, hit him in the head with it. You're like, "No, I want mama right now."
Yeah. So as you were breastfeeding and trying to help her to open wide or to get more breast tissue into her mouth, um, were you receiving any help? Like, so when you got the tongue tie, was there any follow up care? Did they ask you to do any body work, any oral motor work to help improve her, the mobility and strength of her tongue? Or was it a snip and then on your way to figure everything out on your own?
It was just a snip and that's it. There was no follow-up. We didn't start doing body work until, we did see the IBCLC, because I had clogs, and the I had so many clogs and so many recurring clogs, and the lactation consultant in the hospital was giving a lot of the old protocol advice, like warmth compression. Like, it would clear the current clog, but then I felt like it
Massage.
created
Yeah.
more recurring clogs, and it was so painful, and, like, one of the in the first week, I remember having, like, a giant egg-sized protrusion in my armpit, and I was very concerned. I called my, OB/GYN right away, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" And they're like, "Well, just monitor it." They didn't tell me what it was. I eventually found out on the internet that milk ducts begin in your armpit and go all the way down to your belly button. And I was like, "Oh, I wonder if that's just the beginning of a milk duct and it's very, very large." And, because when my baby fed, I could feel it pulling and drawing from that egg in my armpit. I could feel like it felt like when I had clogs, it felt like there was a copper wire from my armpit through my nipple, and every time she fed, that wire was, like, lit up on fire. And,
Mm.
it eventually went
Mm.
down, like, after I pumped and stuff, so I was like, "Okay, I think that's a milk duct." So, when the clogs, they just
Yeah.
kept coming, and I was looking for an IBCLC, and I finally found one. She wasn't on our insurance, didn't take our insurance, so it was out of pocket, and, it was worth it though, like, oh my gosh, the much better advice, like anti-inflammatories, ice because, clogs are because of inflammation. I just thought it was like thick milk. Well, I mean, it could be, some people's could be, and then, I also was taking this sunflower lecithin, and, because when I went to the OB about the clogs, they wondered if I had mastitis, but since I didn't have any redness on the breast and I didn't have a fever, they said, "No, you don't have mastitis." And, the OB was just like, "Well, what do you wanna do? Do you wanna give up, quit breastfeeding?" I'm like, "No, I'd like to keep going. How do I do this without these horrible clogs?" And she just printed off something about sunflower lecithin, and she said, "Well, get yourself this." So I did, and then the clogs just kept coming back, and I was like, "I don't wanna keep living like this in constant clogs, clearing the clogs, clogs again, clearing the clogs." So, with the anti-inflammatories that helped, it was, and then ice, and then, like jiggle, or jumping up and down, and then, things like Epsom salt in the Haka with some warm water. So, when I had done that back then, I guess I did have some really thick milk because I saw, coming out of into the Haka with Epsom salt, like this thick, mucousy string, like a milk snake, like being very slowly, sucked out of my nipple, and I was like, "Huh, okay, well," and then once that cleared, it was like then the milk just whoosh, flowed right into the hock. I was like, "Whoa, okay, cleared it. Cool."
Yeah.
Later on with the anti-inflammatories, because I was on them all the time, I had so many clogs. I was essentially taking 4 ibuprofen every 6 hours, round the clock, and I was doing that for a couple
Mhm.
months, and then,
Mhm.
um my wrists, I guess it's, known as mommy's wrist tendinitis or also decorticans tendonitis. They started to go, and when I went to see the IBCLC again, just for a follow-up appointment, I mentioned about the wrist, and she was like, "And you've been taking the ibuprofen?" I'm like, "Yeah," and she goes, "Oh, that's not good. We need to get you to see, a hand doctor." So she recommended me to a hand doctor because basically we're still dealing with an unknown root cause of inflammation in my body because I'm still getting clogs now, but it's the wrists really. Like I had cut out so many things from my diet at the time. I was, hand doctor, cortisone shots. I was seeing nutritionist, acupuncturist, osteopath, the usual PCP, OB, and PT. I went for PT because I didn't want to get the cortisone shots right away. So I was doing PT for a month. Then I finally was like, it's healing too slowly. I just need to function again. I need to be able to pick up my baby. I need to be able to feed my baby by myself. I always had to have someone around when feeding my baby. I would just sit on the couch. Someone would put a boppy on my lap and put the baby on the boppy, and I would just sit there sometimes like hooking my elbow around to keep her from rolling off. And yeah, so
At what point did that pain start to develop?
she was born in late October. It really hurt definitely by, like, I was getting massive clogs, like, December because I remember going to Christmas and New Year's parties, telling everyone how clogs are so awful, and then by mid-January, I was in so much pain, that's when I reached out to an IBCLC, and then February 1, I had my hand doctor appointment, and then by March 3rd, I got the cortisone shots, which didn't help. They didn't work for me. And it was in cutting out a lot of things like it was supposed to I cut out, nightshade vegetables, processed meats, gluten, and sugar. And the nutritionist also had me cutting out dairy for a few short weeks because she was just saying anything that could be inflammatory, just completely cut it out of your diet. So I could eat like salad for a while. And slowly, once the wrist healed, I was given the okay to build back in some of those foods, started back with nightshade vegetables. We're not big processed meat eaters anyway, so that wasn't a big deal, didn't really notice. And then eventually I could have gluten again, which is great because I love my bread. And still no problems, still no problems, no problems. I did have a bite of my husband's ice cream at one point, and, I had some clogs again, and I was like, "Ooh, ouch, that's, I'm not gonna, have a full ice cream. I'm not gonna do that again." And then when I was at a friend's like, from mid-April, my wrists were okay again, and because I was suffering through, let's see, February, March, half of April. By May, of course, I was back to normal. May, June, July, great. Half of August. By mid-August, I went to a friend's housewarming party and I had half a cupcake. I really wanted the cupcake. It looked great. And I was like, I'm not going to eat a whole cupcake. I'll just have a couple of bites. And that very night, massive clogged ducts, so painful. Like before, with the engorgement or the clogged spots, it felt like, I was being stabbed with push pins or something, or sometimes I felt like I had a skewer through my nipple all the way through to my back, like the pain. But, and like other things like the letdown, some people described it as, oh, you'll feel a tingling. And I was like, tingling? It feels like burning or stinging. And the first 3 months of my baby's life, every time I heard her or saw her, my nipples would just sting. And that feeling's down now. At least that's not so bad. But, yeah, when I had the cupcakes, it wasn't just the pain through the nipple when she fed, it was, like, through the whole breast tissue. It felt like not just the stabbing, but, like, razor blades or thumbtacks were being sucked through my entire breast tissue every time she fed. And then I did end up with clogs, and then my wrists went
For the entirety of the feed or just at certain like, just during the milk release? Were you able to identify that?
entirety of entirety of the feed. I mean, she pretty much comes off when the milk stops
Okay.
flowing, so she doesn't keep sucking when there's no more.
Well, there's always milk there, but, the milk release is when the alveolar glands open up and come into the milk ducts, because if you look at a dissection of a breast, you see the things that look like grapes, and those are the alveolar glands, and that's where the milk is made. And then the milk release is also referred to as the letdown, is when those alveolar glands open up, and that gets triggered by the release of oxytocin from the pituitary gland, and that's when the milk flows into milk ducts. Now, there can still be milk in the milk ducts in between that time if it didn't. In fact, most of the time there is, because our breasts are never fully empty. But sometimes people just feel that feeling at the moment of the milk release. So that's why I was wondering which one it was.
Yeah, I guess it's just when it was all still flowing, cause yeah, but basically, so, like, when I pump and it starts to rather than pouring out and then it's like the little drops and then the drops get much less, like, when it's when it's like, it's less when it's pump, drip, pump, drip, and then pump, pump, drip, pump, drip, or then pump, 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 drip. That's when I'm just like, "Okay, it's time."
Mhm. Yeah, and so the
Um
tingly feeling is for the entire time that she was breastfeeding. Did you have it also during pumping?
It felt like so I thought she was biting me because it was so painful, so I pumped for a bit, and it turns out she wasn't biting me. It was something wrong with here because it felt like the pump was biting me, and I was like, "Okay, so I know the pump is not biting me because I know what this normally feels like, and it's not her, it's me." And I felt bad because it wasn't her fault, but I, you know, pumped and gave her bottles instead thinking it was her, but something wrong with my body.
Right. Okay. And so you've mentioned that you saw a hand doctor and you went to chiropractic care and you went to acupuncture. So, what were all of these various professionals trying to do to help with your symptoms?
Right, a lot of them mention about anti-inflammatory diet, and I guess that's what helped then. As soon as I had that bite of cupcake, I haven't had a bite of sugar since mid-August. It is now April, so it's been, like, what, 8 months? And I thought cutting it all out again would do it, but I don't know, I think it's functional. I think inflammation kicked it off, I'm sure, but also at the osteopath office, they're saying that it's probably overuse injury because first time around was both wrists and base of thumb. So it was much, much worse. It was one that went first because the lactation consultant in the hospital said, "On the side that you have the clog, keep bringing the baby to that side until the clog is cleared." But it took days to clear, and I kept bringing her to that side until it cleared and pumping the other side, and she ended up, developing a feeding aversion 'cause I didn't realize she was sucking and getting no milk all this time, and it turns out maybe I don't think it was a feeding aversion, but rather she injured her jaw trying so hard, getting nothing, and she just tired herself out because then she wasn't even latching onto the bottle with much strength. My husband was like, "She has no suck strength. I don't know what's going on." And so I think she injured her jaw trying, and so that's what this wrist went, and then I couldn't pick her up under the head and shoulders and under the bum like you're supposed to before they have head control. I was prioritizing one hand, and then this other wrist went, and then so I had to switch to picking her up under scooping her up under the armpits, even though she didn't have the head control yet, and then just making sure my fingers were at the back of her head to support her, and then the base of the thumbs went. So that was the first time around when she was 2.5 months old up to 5 months old. And this time around, after the sugar with the cupcake, it's just the left side. So I'm right hand dominant. When I was holding her a whole bunch from when she was 5 months old up to 8 months old, she always wanted to be held all the time. So I was holding her on the left arm and doing things around the house with the right arm. And but I did try to put her in a baby carrier, but of course, it takes a bit to get her in, and then she wants in and out and up and down constantly throughout the day. So it was just more cumbersome to get her in and then have to get her all out, and
Right. And so, were they doing any blood work or trying to figure out other root
yes.
causes for all this additional inflammation?
Yes, that's actually yeah, so many doctors I saw, I'm forgetting about all of them. Yes, we did have some I had lots of blood work, all different doctors are ordering various different things. Of course, they're all saying the results are only as good as what you order to find out the information. Everything of mine was coming back normal. And, they even referred me to rheumatologist. The rheumatologist ran the blood work for all the inflammation markers. He said, "No, it's not autoimmune, it's functional. You probably just have decortical tendinitis, which a lot of moms get from holding their baby. It's probably just the overuse injury, and then the sugar probably kicked off the inflammation response, and it hasn't come back down." Oh, and you were mentioning about body work, earlier. You had asked. I did have my baby after we saw the IBCLC with the clogs. She did have us go, uh, the PT that I went to also works with infants with body work. So my baby saw chiropractor, the PT, and the osteopath that I was going to.
Did those people specialize in tongue tie? Were they able to help improve her tongue function as a result of having had a tongue tie in utero until her first few days of life?
The PT did work on the motor skills in the mouth, but, the chiropractor and the osteopath worked on the tightness in her neck because we did notice she had a lean preference in one side when we put her down, and we did all this, the things like in the bassinet, don't put her the same direction because maybe the baby wants to look out the window, so we both, we put her different sides, and also the bassinet we moved around the house, so she didn't always have one thing to look at all the time.
Yeah, and did you see improvements in her latch after the body work, or did it pretty much stay the same?
It's hard to tell. We did notice that she didn't keep her head flopping only to the one side anymore, so I guess that was the goal at that time. It's hard to remember when it all lined up, but I do remember, like, I think for me, I hit exclusive breastfeeding around the 3-month mark because we were still a combination of pumping and feeding directly at that time. And I just remember, like, one day I was like, "Babies are supposed to have this ability." I read somewhere if you just do skin to skin and you lay down with them, do this, like, laying back, relaxed feed, they should be able to do it, and so I just took a day where I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna lay in this bed, I'm gonna have her on me. When she's ready to feed, we're just gonna do this." And she had a hard time 'cause she was still, like, she couldn't stay on, she was flopping all over trying to find it, very slippery, slipping off, but I just stuck it out, and then she finally did, and I was like, "Hey, it works." And then we didn't have any problems after that. It was like this moment where I don't know if, like, maybe we were supporting her head and we were restricting her movement. Like, I did read later that you shouldn't be holding their head when they're feeding because you're preventing them from being able to get in the position that they need to, and so I was like, "Oh, I didn't know that." They said, like, "She's a baby, she doesn't have head." I was
I
like, "Yes,
know,
holding her head."
right, yeah, right. Yeah, it's so hard, and most of the time in the hospital, you're being taught to hold their head to bring them to the breast. Almost every parent has their hands, around the back of the baby's head when they're trying to latch them. Um
Yeah, and
Go
after
ahead.
that moment, I finally got the side lying feed, which made night times much easier because that was really hard before, like, where she was, where it flopped and hit, like, as she gets bigger too, like, it got better, like, her mouth got bigger too.